Stop acting obsolete, Debbie. This line is steel, not glass. Trent Voss threw it across the pump station catwalk at 5:40, with the north wind cutting hard enough to sting through gloves, and every conversation on the deck went quiet for a half-second after it landed. Debbie Clark stood beside a corroded instrument stand with her tablet open and a clamp meter hanging from her jacket pocket, and she felt the sentence hit in 3 layers. First as public disrespect, then as command pressure, then as a warning that he had already decided what answer he wanted. 12 days later, ranch well water 40 miles downslope would foam brown in a sink basin, while state inspectors wrapped the Red Mesa Gate in hazard tape. At 5:40, none of the roughnecks leaning against the handrail could see that picture yet. Debbie could not see it either, but she knew exactly how it started. The station was a low concrete pad set into scrubland outside Red Mesa, ringed by 2 vertical separators, a flare mast, and a row of pumps inside insulated housings that throbbed like idling trucks. Sodium lights hummed overhead, even though dawn had started to pale the eastern horizon. The 36-inch transmission line came in from the west, climbed through a valve manifold, then dropped back underground toward milepost 214, where it crossed shallow sandstone that held seasonal groundwater. In normal operation, the system ran at roughly 1,100 pounds per square inch. Under standard protocol, corrosion alarms were treated like fire alarms. By site practice, nobody called a corrosion engineer obsolete. Voss moved toward her with that clean hard hat look she had learned to distrust. Polished boots, spotless jacket, no dust in the seams. The uniform of a manager who visited danger but did not work inside it. He jabbed a finger at the readout she had just called into control. "Say it again," he said. "You're shutting me down over a dashboard color." Debbie kept her eyes on him, then on the manifold, then back on him. She forced her voice level because she had trained herself to keep technical facts separate from emotion, even when emotion was what the room wanted. "I'm saying the cathodic protection rectifier has logged red alarms for 19 days. I'm saying UT thickness at 214 degrees Celsius has drifted below minimum threshold. I'm saying we have a cracked weld cap sweating product. That is not a color problem. That is a metal loss problem." A junior operator named Luis shifted beside the pump control cabinet and looked at his boots. Radio chatter hissed from the trailer down the pad. Somebody in dispatch asked for confirmation on restart sequencing. Nobody answered. Voss gave a short laugh that carried further than he intended in the cold air. "You hear this?" he called to the crew. "Every quarter, same theater, same delay, same expensive memo." Debbie felt the old pattern settle into place. She had seen versions of it in other basins, other companies, other men with production bonuses tied to throughput windows. First, they reframed hazard as bureaucracy. Then they reframed caution as personality. Then they looked for a replacement signature. He stepped closer. "You're acting like a coward, Debbie. We're behind. We've got transfer nominations stacked into tomorrow, and you're freezing a live line because one weld made you nervous." Her jaw tightened. She did not raise her voice. "I don't get nervous over welds," she said. "I calculate failure margins." For a moment he stared at her as if she had answered in another language. Then he turned to the crew again, smiling like he was carrying them through someone else's panic. "This is exactly what I mean," he said. "Obsolete mindset, old school fear. We run modern monitoring now. We have real-time dashboards. We don't run this place by gut feeling and ghost stories. Debbie had been in transmission integrity for 16 years. She knew each stage of the line's defensive system the way mechanics know the pitch of a healthy bearing. Coating as first barrier, cathodic protection as electrochemical backstop, inspection intervals as verification, excavation and repair as non-negotiable intervention. When two barriers failed at once, the line did not care about management language. Steel obeyed chemistry and stress. Sulfate-reducing bacteria did not stop because a schedule slipped. She pulled off her glove, unlocked her phone, and opened the certification file she carried for moments exactly like this. "For the record," she said, looking past him to include the men on the deck, "my name is Debbie Clark. I am a corrosion engineer. I make $142,000 a year because I keep invisible failures from becoming public disasters." No one laughed. Luis looked up this time. Another operator, Mina, gave a single nod without speaking. Voss's smile vanished. "Save the speech." "It isn't a speech," Debbie said. "It's scope of authority." He leaned in, voice lower now, sharp enough that only the nearby crew could hear. "Your scope exists because I allow it to exist. Don't confuse policy with power." That line sent a flush of heat into her face despite the wind. She had sat through leadership seminars where the company used words like culture, accountability, safety, ownership. On the deck, translated into field grammar, it was simpler. Keep product moving, and if something goes wrong, make sure the paperwork points away from management. She held her ground. The line at milepost 214 has a disbonded coating zone. Inline inspection showed 63% wall loss in a cluster. We have active pitting on coupons. We have a cracked weld toe. Until we verify integrity by excavation and repair, restart is a no. Voss widened his hands as if she was proving his point. "Listen to this catastrophe script at sunrise." "It's not a script, it's sequence." He pointed at her tablet. "Sequence? Here's sequence. We run pressure test, we watch trend lines, we move product, and we fix cosmetic defects in planned maintenance." "Cosmetic doesn't sweat black moisture," Debbie said. He took one step closer, close enough she could smell coffee and mint over diesel exhaust. "Then maybe you've gone soft. Maybe that's what 16 years does. Makes people protect their reputation instead of the operation." Debbie heard a wrench clatter on steel grating behind her. No one interrupted. The silence felt like a circle drawn around them. She answered anyway. "My reputation is built on keeping this operation from poisoning someone else's land." At that, his expression hardened in a way she recognized as escalation from persuasion to punishment. "You want plain language?" Voss said. "Fine. You've become lazy. You hide behind risk words every time we push output. I need solutions, not vetoes." The word lazy cut deeper than obsolete had. Obsolete accused her methods, lazy accused her ethic. And on this site, work ethic was the last social currency that mattered. She thought of winter digs in frozen caliche, summer trench jobs at 112 degrees, midnight coating inspections by floodlight, years of writing reports nobody praised, because disaster never happened. Invisible labor only looked easy to people who benefited from it. She exhaled slowly and kept her hands still. A proper excavation at 214 costs less than one contamination claim. You asked for a solution. That is the solution. Voss looked at his watch, then at the trailer, then back at her. "No. Your answer is delay. Delay is loss." Debbie turned her tablet so he could see the trend graph without touching it. Red alarm continuity, voltage depression, thickness decline. Loss is when you ignore a crack under cyclic pressure and pretend software makes steel stronger. He barked a laugh again, but now there was no humor in it. You love that line, don't you? Physics lecture for the peasants? She met his stare. Physics doesn't need an audience. Mina coughed into her sleeve and keyed her radio. Control, hold on, restart command. Integrity sign-off pending. Voss swung toward her. Negative, resume sequence. Mina did not move. Her eyes flicked to Debbie, then down. The wind gusted across the catwalk, carrying the sour metallic smell from the vent stack. Somewhere below, a relief valve chattered and settled. Debbie felt the whole station as a living mechanical body under strain. Pump vibration through grating, pressure pulse in the line, radio static stuttering from the trailer speaker. She knew this system in her bones. That was why the insult felt less like anger and more like alarm. Men like Voss used contempt as a tool when they needed to flatten expertise fast. He turned back to Debbie, voice now loud enough for everyone again. Last chance. You clear this restart, or you step off the site and let someone competent do the job. Debbie watched his face and understood the structure beneath the words. It was not a request. It was a test designed to produce one of two outcomes: compliance he could own, or refusal he could punish. She felt fear, but it was not fear of machinery. It was fear of what hierarchy could force into motion while still claiming procedure had been followed. She tucked the phone away, squared her shoulders, and answered clearly, so dispatch recording would capture it through the open trailer door. I will not clear restart on a line with unresolved integrity alarms at a known wall loss cluster over a shallow aquifer crossing. A few heads turned at the word aquifer. People heard that word differently than they heard corrosion. Corrosion sounded technical. Aquifer sounded like kitchens and livestock and people drawing water in the dark before work. Voss's jaw clenched. You are done grandstanding? Debbie did not blink. I'm documenting. For a second he looked ready to keep shouting. Instead he gave a thin, controlled nod that was colder than rage. Then document this, he said. You're off primary sign-off pending management review. Hand your field authority badge to compliance. He extended his hand palm up in front of the crew. The humiliation was deliberate and public. Debbie felt her heartbeat in her throat as she unclipped the badge from her vest. The metal clip scraped on fabric, a small sound that carried strangely far. She placed it in his hand. He did not thank her. Luis stared at the manifold as if concentration alone could erase the moment. Mina lowered her radio and said nothing. Across the pad, the pumps kept their steady mechanical thrum, indifferent to titles, pride, and office politics. Voss tucked the badge into his jacket pocket and stepped back. Now we can get the station run by people who still live in the present. Debbie looked at the line pressure display, then at the horizon, where first light had finally broken over Red Mesa. She said nothing more on the catwalk. The insult had done its work for him. It had also done something for her. It stripped any illusion that this was a disagreement among professionals. By 6:10, with wind still shearing across the station and radios restarting their clipped routine cadence, Debbie walked down the graded stairs toward the trailer to begin a record that would outlast his authority. The trailer door slammed behind Debbie and rattled the aluminum frame hard enough to make the wall map tremble. Inside, the heater clicked and blew stale, warm air over wet boots, coffee, and the faint sulfur trace that always followed sour service operations. She set her tablet on the narrow desk, pulled the digital log template open, and started with what mattered first: time, location, system state, alarm continuity. Her hands were steady now. The shake had left when the badge clip left her vest. Humiliation passed, numbers stayed. Mina came in 2 steps later, shut the door, and kept her voice low. Control keeps asking if sign-off transferred. Debbie looked up from the keyboard. Transferred is a legal word. My authority was suspended. That's different. Mina nodded once, absorbing it. You want me to hold restart by operations caution? I want you to log integrity unresolved at 214C. Exact words. Debbie rotated the screen so Mina could see the line item as she typed it. If anyone edits that later, audit trail will show it. Radio hiss cracked from the wall unit. Dispatch asked for status again, clipped and impatient. Mina keyed in, repeated the phrase exactly, then unkeyed and exhaled through her nose. The trailer fell quiet except for the heater fan and the distant pump rhythm under the floor. Debbie opened the rectifier dashboard and drilled from summary into raw trend. The red bar that Voss had called dashboard color was not cosmetic. It was a continuity of failure. 19 days of undervoltage on a pipeline segment that depended on cathodic protection to stop electrochemical attack. Coating defects happen. Every pipeline engineer knows that. The coating is a raincoat, not armor. Cathodic protection is the active system that turns corrosion current away from steel. When that protection drops and stays dropped, bare steel becomes the anode in a battery made of soil, water, and dissolved salts. Metal leaves the pipe atom by atom. No sparks, no drama, just loss. She enlarged the plot and marked 4 periods where station load had increased while rectifier output stayed depressed. Pressure up, protection down. Exactly the pairing she had warned about. She attached the trend export to the incident folder and named it with UTC timestamp, not local shorthand, because board reviewers cared about standard time. Luis knocked once and leaned in, not helmet still on, cheeks red from wind. Deb, you want eyes on the weld again? Voss told me to prep startup checklist. Checklist can wait. She grabbed her jacket and UT case. We're going now. Bring the headlamp and the mirror. Outside, dawn had cleared the ridge, but the low sun did nothing for warmth. The wind still came broadside across the pad and carried grit that clicked against hard hats. Debbie led them along the manifold to the fenced section where the field weld cap sat in a shallow cradle of pipe support steel. At first glance, it looked unchanged from pre-dawn. Dark coating scarred by age, chalk marks from previous inspection, no dramatic rupture. Most dangerous defects looked ordinary until measured. She knelt, wiped the weld area with lint-free pads, and motioned for Luis to angle the light. The crack at the weld toe was thin, almost delicate, tracking along the heat-affected zone where base metal and weld metal handled stress differently. She pressed a clean, white absorbent strip against the line. When she pulled it back, a dark sheen spread across the fibers, viscous and metallic. Luis swallowed. That from condensation? No. She held the strip under his lamp. Condensation beads clear and cool. This has hydrocarbon sheen and iron sulfide tint. Product is migrating through a path. Slow, but active. He stared at the seam, then at her UT probe. Can we still gauge through coating this rough? We can trend it if we prep right. She applied coolant, seated the transducer just off the crack, and waited for stable echo. The meter chirped and displayed thickness. She recorded, moved 2 inches, measured again, built a grid point by point. Numbers fell where they had fallen all week, below calculated minimum in the cluster, with local pits dropping lower than average wall loss suggested. Corrosion was not uniform thinning. It was topography, peaks, valleys, sharp pits that concentrated stress. Mina joined them with a clipboard wrapped in clear plastic against the wind. Debbie called values aloud, and Mina repeated each one before writing. Dual capture. No single-point memory, no missing digits. At the 6th point, the meter flickered, then settled at a value that tightened Debbie's chest, despite all her preparation. She had seen low points before, but this one sat directly adjacent to the crack path. Crack plus thin wall plus pressure cycling was not additive. It was multiplicative. Defect interaction made life prediction collapse fast. "Read it back," Debbie said. Mina read the number. Luis looked between them. "That below code minimum?" "It's below our integrity threshold for this pressure class," Debbie said. "And this line doesn't run constant. It pulses with transfer windows. Every pulse opens and closes that flaw." The station loudspeaker popped and squealed. Then Voss's voice came through from somewhere up pad, hard and controlled. "Field team at Manifold, report clear to run status." Debbie did not touch the radio at her belt. Mina looked at her, then keyed anyway. "Integrity unresolved at 214C. Additional data collection in progress." 3 seconds of silence followed. "Copy," Voss answered, clipped flat. No argument, no lecture, which unsettled Debbie more than shouting would have. Quiet from management in moments like this usually meant they were building a workaround. She stood and moved to the temporary test spool where corrosion coupons had been installed last quarter. Coupons were sacrificial metal samples exposed to process conditions to estimate corrosion mechanisms and rate. Simple tools, often ignored because they looked too basic beside dashboards. She opened the retrieval port with Luis spotting, slid the coupon holder out, and laid the strips in a clean tray. Even through gloves, she could feel roughness where smooth steel should have been. Pitting was visible as clustered pin craters under black deposits. Luis wrinkled his nose. "Smells like rotten eggs and old batteries." "Sulfide activity," Debbie said, "and probably bacterial colonies under deposit. We'll culture to confirm." She photographed each coupon with scale marker and tag, then sealed them in labeled bags. Physical evidence had to be boringly exact. Chain of custody line, collector initials, witness initials, storage temperature, container seal number. Stories could be challenged. Labels, less so. Back in the trailer, she logged samples into the evidence cabinet and placed the key in the locked drawer assigned to integrity, even though she had just been stripped of sign-off authority. Custody protocol belonged to the company standard, not Voss's mood. Mina watched her key movement and understood without asking. Debbie pivoted to SCADA trend overlays and pulled pressure waveform for the last 72 hours against rectifier undervoltage intervals. The pattern aligned with painful neatness. Each throughput increase preceded slight pressure, ripple at milepost 214, and incremental degradation at local protection readings. Not dramatic spikes, just repeated loading at the wrong place and wrong time. Fatigue damage in pipelines rarely announced itself with one giant number. It accumulated in cycles, each one tiny, each one real. At 6:32, the junior compliance coordinator arrived, breathless, carrying a fresh hard hat and a tablet still wrapped in shipping plastic. Caleb Rinn, 26 MBA, smart enough to know spreadsheets, knew enough to confuse completeness with truth. Debbie had seen the type get promoted fast into liability. Voss said, "I'm temporary integrity signatory," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I need current status package." She slid a printed stack across the desk. Rectifier alarm continuity, UT grid with witness initials, weld photo set, coupon chain forms, and last week's inline inspection excerpt highlighting the 63% wall loss cluster. "Read all of it before you sign anything." He tapped the cover page with one finger. SCADA mainline pressure still within operating envelope. "Envelope is not permission," Debbie said. "Envelope assumes barriers are intact." Caleb tried to smile. It failed halfway. "He said your thresholds are conservative." "They're derived from code, metallurgy, and actual wall condition." Debbie kept her tone level, technical, unemotional. "Conservative means margin. Margin is what keeps normal days normal." He flipped to the UT sheet, frowned at the scatter, and asked, "Why do these points vary so much over inches?" "Because corrosion under disbonded coating is localized. Water and ions get trapped, shielding develops, bacteria colonize under deposit, and pits grow where current distribution is uneven. Average values hide pits. Cracks find pits." She pointed to the map. "This is why field verification exists." Caleb looked at the weld photo where black moisture glossed along the toe line. "Could this be residual from prior seep?" Debbie shook her head. Absorbent strip was clean before contact. Fresh sheen returned twice. Documented with timestamp. "If you need a third witness, we can repeat now." He hesitated, then nodded. "Repeat." They returned to the weld with Mina as witness. The wind had eased a fraction, and by 6:45 the sun sat clear above the ridge, throwing hard light across the manifold. Debbie cleaned, applied fresh strip, waited, and held it up when dark staining appeared again. Caleb stared longer this time. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's active." She handed him the strip in a sample envelope and watched him sign the label with a hand that was no longer steady. Good. Fear could be useful when tied to facts. At 6:52, they moved to the rectifier cabinet. Debbie opened the panel and showed him the output readings and alarm history on the local controller, not just the dashboard abstraction. Low output, intermittent dropout, failed remote reset attempts. She pointed to a corroded ground connection she had flagged 3 days earlier. "This connection plus coating disbondment means protection current is not reaching defect area consistently," she said. "On paper, system exists. In soil, system is failing." Caleb crouched to look closer. "Can't we increase output and monitor?" "If coating were sound, maybe. With disbonded coating over existing wall loss and a crack, throwing current is not a cure. It's a patch on a breach with pressure still cycling." He stood and brushed dust off his knees, trying to recover authority. "I need a clear recommendation statement." "You already have it. Shut down, excavate, isolate segment, cut out failed section, repair weld, recoating, retest, then controlled restart." Debbie held his gaze. "Anything else is paper management." Radio chatter rose again from the trailer, faster now, overlapping voices from dispatch, pump room, and scheduling. Through the open door, she heard a phrase she hated: transfer window tightening. Schedule pressure translated directly to bad decisions. By 7:03, Debbie was back at the desk, building the formal technical alarm notice in the company system. She wrote in strict mechanism language because adjectives invited debate and mechanisms did not. She documented disbonded coding at MP214 crossing zone, sustained cathodic protection red alarms, verified weld toe crack with active hydrocarbon weep, UT minimum breaches with localized pit severity, coupon evidence consistent with active microbiologically influenced corrosion, an elevated risk of flaw growth under pressure cycling, with potential pathway to shallow sandstone groundwater interface. She attached 19 files and 2 witness statements. Caleb lingered near the printer, reading each line as it emerged. "If I submit this," he said, "operations will flag me for stoppage." "If you don't," Debbie answered, eyes on the screen, "regulators will flag you for negligence after release. Choose your audience." He said nothing for several seconds, then signed the witness section for the repeat moisture test and the rectifier cabinet verification. He did not sign restart. Not yet. At 7:11, Debbie printed one hard copy, stamped it with time, and placed it in the locked incident binder in front of Mina and Luis. Redundancy again? Digital trail? Hard copy? Witness memory. She uploaded the same package to the insurer notification draft folder, but left it unsent, pending formal internal routing, exactly per procedure. She was building a record that could survive deletion attempts and management spin. Facts had to be engineered like pressure systems, with backups. Outside the trailer window, a service truck rolled past toward the pump house, and she caught a glimpse of Voss on his phone, pacing, free hand chopping the air. He did not come in. The distance was tactical now. He no longer needed to argue with her. He needed someone else to own the next signature. Debbie leaned back for the first time that morning and listened to the station. Pumps pulsing through concrete, valves ticking on thermal change, radios neural clipping out status codes that sounded ordinary to anyone who didn't know the underlying condition. She did know it. That was the burden and the point. Technical alarm was never just a red light. It was the moment where invisible processes became visible enough for a choice. Mina set a fresh mug beside her without comment. Debbie wrapped both hands around it, felt heat return to her fingers, and watched Caleb standing at the threshold with the restart form in one hand and her alarm packet in the other, caught between hierarchy and metallurgy, while the line kept waiting under pressure. Caleb stayed at the threshold, restart form limp in his left hand, Debbie's packet rigid in his right, while the trailer heater clicked off and left only the pump vibration underfoot. Debbie watched his eyes track from her signature block to the boxed line marked Interim Integrity Approval. He looked as if he wanted one clean number that would make the decision disappear. She already knew there wasn't one. The radio cracked with dispatch impatience. Red Mesa, status on restart authorization. Scheduler needs transfer confirmation in 5. Caleb flinched at the speaker. Debbie did not. Answer with the logged language, she said. Mina keyed up first. Integrity unresolved at 214C. A second voice cut in before dispatch could respond. Voss on-site channel sharp and flat. Negative, compliance has interim authority. Caleb, give me the form. Caleb did not move. Debbie held his gaze and kept her tone strictly procedural. If you sign restart while active weep is present and CP remains in red continuity, You're certifying barrier integrity you haven't got. Mechanism is not theoretical. Pressure cycle opens the crack mouth. Sulfide environment supports hydrogen entry. Crack tip embrittles. Growth rate accelerates. You can run for hours and still be losing margin the whole time. Voss answered from outside, louder now, voice bleeding through both radio and thin trailer wall. I asked for a yes or no, not a lecture. Debbie turned toward the microphone and spoke clearly enough that dispatch recording would carry every syllable. No restart. Specific reason. Interacting defects at milepost 214, crossing groundwater-bearing sandstone. Defect interaction means crack, plus localized wall loss, plus lost cathodic protection. That combination invalidates normal operating envelope assumptions. There was a small pause, then a scoff from the channel. You keep hiding behind words. She pressed the talk key again. Those words are the failure path. By 7:20, the sunlight had hardened into full morning glare across the pad, and the catwalk outside the trailer windows flashed white every time someone crossed it. Voss appeared in the doorway without knocking, still holding his phone, jaw tight enough to sharpen his face. 2 crew leads hovered several steps behind him, not entering, close enough to witness. He looked at Caleb first. Form. Caleb offered the clipboard halfway, then hesitated and pulled it back. I still have unresolved evidence entries, Trent. Voss's expression shifted from annoyance to predatory patience. Then resolve them. You're not being asked for theology. You're being asked whether current pressure is inside allowable range. Debbie answered before Caleb could. Allowable range is conditional on intact wall and active corrosion control. We no longer have both. You can't separate pressure from condition. Voss turned on her. You don't have sign-off authority. I still have engineering duty to report mechanisms that can fail the line. He took one step into the trailer, close enough that Mina quietly moved the incident binder farther from the edge of the desk, as if distance alone might keep it safe. Duty is not the same thing as command, he said. You were removed from command. Debbie stood. She did not raise her voice, which made his volume feel louder by contrast. Then put this in your command log exactly. If you restart with that crack active, you raise the probability of through-wall failure under routine cycling. If failure initiates in that segment, release pathway trends, downslope toward recharge channels. That is foreseeable. He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. Foreseeable? You're writing courtroom lines now. I'm writing operating reality. Voss pointed toward the door with 2 fingers, not looking away from her. Operating reality is we have nominations stacked, storage near ceiling, and contractual penalties every hour this line sits idle. You are not paid to sabotage throughput. Debbie felt anger rise and forced it down into precision. I am paid to prevent condition-based failure. Shutdown and dig is not sabotage. It's maintenance you postponed. He tapped his watch. Clock is running. Caleb signs in 60 seconds. Caleb looked sick. I need at least a conditional hold until we verify rectifier recovery and isolate the weld segment. There's no isolate plan in today's schedule, Voss snapped. You have authority. Use it. Debbie faced Caleb directly. Don't let him collapse separate steps into one decision. Rectifier recovery does not heal cracked steel. Dashboard green does not erase pit geometry. If you sign now, your name becomes the bridge between warning and release. Voss swung back to her. Enough! You're poisoning this room. She met him squarely. No, corrosion is. The silence after that line lasted only 2 seconds, but it felt longer because no one in the doorway shifted or pretended to work. Voss inhaled through his nose, controlled himself, then changed tactics from argument to formal command cadence. Debbie Clark, this is a direct order to cease interference in restart authorization. You will not address compliance signatory. You will not transmit additional caution language to dispatch, and you will surrender all active project files to operations management pending review. Debbie understood the structure immediately. He wanted to isolate the decision, strip witnesses, and relabel technical objection as conduct violation. She answered in the same formal cadence. I cannot comply with any order that suppresses integrity evidence tied to imminent environmental risk. Files are already logged in controlled storage with witness signatures. Tampering will generate an audit flag. He stared at her for a heartbeat, then smiled thinly. The kind of smile that came when someone believed power could rewrite sequence. Audit flag, he repeated. You think software protects you? She shook her head once. No, process protects the public when people decide not to. Voss turned to Mina. Delete outgoing drafts in insurer folder. Mina went rigid. I can't do that without document control authorization. You have my authorization. Your role doesn't override records protocol, she said, voice small but steady. Voss looked back at Debbie as if Mina's refusal had confirmed his accusation. You've got them trained to stall. Debbie said nothing to that. She stepped to the side, opened the evidence cabinet in full view, and removed only what procedure required for transfer. Duplicate copy set, custody sheet, seal verification. She laid them on the desk between herself and Caleb. Read the mechanism summary out loud, she told him. If you still decide restart, at least do it fully informed. Voss snapped. He is not in school. Caleb swallowed and read anyway, voice uneven. Sustained undervoltage at CP rectifier, disbonded coding zone, UT minimum threshold breaches adjacent to weld toe crack, active hydrocarbon weep verified by repeat absorbent test, elevated likelihood of flaw growth under cyclic pressure. He stopped there. Debbie kept her eyes on him. Continue. He resumed, quieter. Potential migration pathway to shallow aquifer system if release occurs. Voss took the page from his hand and dropped it back on the desk. Potential. If. Maybe. This is fear language. Debbie answered immediately. No, that is probability language. Fear is what you call it when you don't like the probability. At 7:31, the dispatch channel pinged again with a countdown tone. Scheduler had escalated to regional operations, and everyone in the trailer heard the urgency in the voice that followed. Red Mesa. Transfer slot closes at 0800. Confirm go/no-go now. Voss grabbed the mic before anyone else. Stand by for go. Debbie reached over and keyed a second handset tied to the same recorder circuit. Correction. Integrity advises no-go pending excavation. He slapped the handset cradle with the back of his knuckles, hard enough to rattle plastic. You are done transmitting. She stepped back, palms open, keeping herself visibly non-threatening while refusing to retreat from the point. Then document that you overrode integrity warning. I will document insubordination, he shot back. Document both. His face flushed. For a moment, Debbie thought he might keep sparring. But he pivoted again to hierarchy, the tool he trusted most. Caleb Rinn, he said, each word clipped. As acting compliance signatory, do you certify restart readiness based on current monitored conditions? Caleb looked from Voss to Debbie to the form. Sweat had darkened his collar despite the cold morning. "I certify current monitored pressure and flow are within dashboard limits," he said slowly. "But I also note unresolved integrity findings." "That is not the question." "It's the only truthful answer." Voss's voice dropped lower, dangerous in its calm. "Truthful answer is yes or no." Caleb shut his eyes for half a second, opened them, and said, "No, not without conditional hold." Voss held his stare, then nodded once as if concluding a private calculation. "Fine. You're both relieved from this decision." He turned toward the door. "Jared." A field supervisor from outside stepped in, broad shoulders filling the frame, expression blank from practice. He carried another clipboard and a radio already set to operations priority. Debbie recognized the move immediately. Replacement inside the hour. "Jared doesn't have integrity qualification for this segment. He has management authorization. He has no corrosion authority." Voss ignored her and addressed Jared. "You are temporary operations certifier. Use SCADA baseline. Complete restart sequence alpha and report green status at each gate." Jared hesitated just long enough to prove he understood what he was being asked to bypass. "Integrity hold is still active in system." "Not anymore." Voss looked at Mina. "Clear hold code." Mina gripped her pen so hard her knuckles blanched. "I need written instruction." "You have verbal instruction. Procedure requires written." Voss pulled a notebook from his jacket, tore a page, scribbled one line, and shoved it toward her. "There. Written." Mina read it, then quietly attached it to the log with a staple. Debbie noticed that she stapled it on top of the time-stamped no-go entry instead of replacing it. Another witness act, small and crucial. Debbie faced Voss one last time. "You're constructing deniability in real time, and it won't hold. The mechanism doesn't care who signs." He pointed at the floor near the door. "You are no longer assigned to this site. Security escort if needed." She did not move yet. "State your action clearly for the record." He obliged, almost pleased to turn punishment into procedure. "Debbie Clark is terminated for insubordination, refusal to support operational directives, and disruption of authorized restart activities. Effective immediately." The words landed with a physical weight in the trailer. Luis, still by the window, dropped his eyes. Mina stared straight ahead. Caleb took one involuntary step backward, as if the firing itself had shifted air pressure. Debbie felt a brief pulse of grief for the job she had done for years, then let it pass through and out. "Add this to the same record," she said. "Termination follows documented refusal to approve restart under unresolved integrity alarms at MP214. Voss spread his hands. "Add whatever makes you sleep." She reached for her personal bag, left company badges and keys on the desk in a neat row, and removed only her phone, hard hat liner, and notebook with personal field calculations. Before zipping the bag, she turned to Mina and spoke in plain operational language. "Seal cabinet after my exit. Preserve chain. No edits without audit note." Mina nodded once. "Understood." As Debbie stepped toward the door, Jared moved past her into the space she had occupied, already asking Voss for restart gate sequence. Voss answered with clipped speed. "Prime pump 2, open downstream block in 10% increments, watch suction, maintain ramp under standard curve, call out each checkpoint." Debbie stopped at the threshold and gave Jared a final sentence. Not emotional, not dramatic, just the mechanism one more time. If you see micro drop oscillation near 214 during ramp, that is not sensor noise. That is leak initiation behavior. Jared did not answer. His jaw flexed once and he looked at the form. Outside, the wind had eased, and the station sounded unnaturally orderly, the way dangerous systems often did, right before consequences surfaced. By 7:44, she crossed the catwalk without escort because nobody volunteered to walk beside her. Behind her, through the open trailer door, she heard Voss on radio delivering the line he had wanted all morning. Red Mesa initiating restart now. Debbie kept walking toward the gravel lot, each step steady, while inside the trailer her refusal remained stapled to the log, and her firing sat directly beneath it in the same time-stamped record. Debbie had just reached the gravel edge of the lot when Pump 2's startup whine rolled across the station like a rising saw blade, thin at first, then heavy, then steady, and she stopped with one hand on her truck door because she could hear the sequence she had refused being executed step by step. From inside the fence, radio traffic bled through the trailer speaker and through Mina's phone call, held low under her headset muff, reading procedure as if fidelity to wording could replace fidelity to conditions. Prime complete. Suction stable. Opening downstream block 10%. Voss answered immediately. Continue ramp. No hesitation, no hold point, no mention of the crack, the weep, the collapsed wall margin. Debbie stared back through the chain link and pipe racks toward the trailer windows, each pane flashing morning light, and felt dread settle in as a physical weight behind her ribs. This was the part that always looked ordinary from a distance. She set her bag in the passenger seat, but did not climb in. The wind had dropped, and that made the station's mechanical sounds clearer. Motor hum, valve actuator clicks, a distant relay snapping, the low pulse of fluid moving where it should not have been moving yet. Dispatch came over the channel again, audible from the trailer speaker in Mina's open line. Red Mesa, confirmed transfer slot active by 0800. Voss replied, on schedule. Then Jared again, 20% open, pressure ramp at planned curve. Debbie pulled her phone and typed a note with timestamp, not because she expected to change what was happening, but because records were the one tool she still controlled. 7:45. Restart active under override. Unresolved integrity at 214C. She added weather, line pressure at last known value, and the name of each voice heard on radio. Hands had taken her badge. They had not taken chronology. Inside the fence, Mina stepped out of the trailer with a headset pressed to one ear and a clipboard against her vest. She looked toward the lot, saw Debbie still there, and gave the smallest possible shake of her head. Not as refusal, not as panic, more as confirmation that no one had stopped to reconsider. Jared's next call followed within seconds. 30%. Minor suction flutter. Voss cut in before anyone else. Expected during ramp. Hold your curve. Debbie's jaw tightened. Suction flutter at this stage could be benign entrained gas, or it could be transient behavior from a developing leak path changing local hydraulics. Context decided which. Context was exactly what Voss had removed. Debbie thumbed a text to Mina. If flutter repeats in periodic pattern, mark frequency and correlate to 214 pressure node. Mina glanced down, then keyed and relayed it in clipped neutral cadence. Voss came back so fast he had likely been waiting with his thumb on transmit. She is off assignment. Keep her off this channel. Debbie let the silence after that sit for one breath, then sent a second line by text. Recorded advisory only. Periodic oscillation is leak initiation indicator in compromised segments. Mina did not repeat that one. No one acknowledged it. A welder near the pipe rack glanced toward the lot and then away, shoulders hunched. The body language of people who knew truth and paycheck were no longer aligned. At 7:47, 2 minutes after restart began, the station loudspeaker crackled and spit static. Jared spoke faster now. 40%, upstream pressure 1094, downstream tracking. Then, softer, almost to himself, but still broadcast, seeing a dip at the 214 virtual node. Tiny. Debbie closed her eyes for a second and opened them again. Virtual node meant modeled pressure, not direct local gauge, a SCADA estimate based on flow and sensor inputs. Tiny meant non-zero. She watched a pair of ravens lift off the flare mast and wheel east, black against the pale sky, and hated that her mind registered the detail in the same instant that the line began to tell the truth. Voss answered, voice sharpened by impatience. Ignore model jitter, keep opening. Jared said, copy, 50%. Somewhere in the pump house, a bearing emitted a brief metallic chirp and settled. Debbie stepped away from her truck and moved back toward the fence line, as if 10 fewer yards could change the chain of events. It could not. But she needed eyes on motion, on people, on exits. Through the bars, she saw Luis running a hand over a handrail without noticing he was doing it. An old stress tell. Mina stood rigid beside the trailer steps, head set on, eyes fixed on a point beyond the manifold like she was reading numbers in the air. The line shook once underfoot, subtle but real. A transmitted thud from a valve stroke somewhere beyond the visible station. 60%, Jared reported, suction noise increasing. Then another voice, dispatch this time trying for calm and failing slightly. Red Mesa, your 214 pressure differential just widened by 0.03. Confirm instrumentation health. Jared hesitated. Debbie heard the gap and counted it without meaning to. 1, 2. Voss filled it. Instrumentation healthy. Continue transfer startup. The dread deepened because she could hear the social mechanism more clearly than the hydraulic one. Uncertain operator, aggressive manager, external prompt dismissed, sequence protected, over signal interpretation. Debbie pulled up the state pipeline board emergency reporting number on her phone and hovered over call. She did not press yet. Protocol required an actual reportable condition, not anticipation. She hated that distinction and respected it anyway. Her thumb stayed suspended while the radio carried Jared's next checkpoint. 70% open. Repeating micro drop at 214. Pattern interval about 12 seconds. Debbie whispered the number out loud to no one. 12-second periodicity during ramp meant cyclic interaction, not random noise. She called Mina instead and spoke fast, low, and exact. Tell Jared stop ramp. Hold pressure. He's feeding crack growth. Mina relayed it verbatim over channel. Voss broke in, voice now openly hostile. Security to lock gate. Remove unauthorized personnel. No security came. Everyone was already occupied by the machine. At 7:49, the first hard alarm tone hit the channel, a 2-note pulse that meant leak detection pre-trigger, and every person on site changed posture at the same instant as if pulled by the same wire. Jared's breathing became audible over mic. I've got acoustic anomaly flag near MP214. Voss snapped. False positive until confirmed. Do not slam. Debbie felt cold spread through her hands despite the sun on her face. Acoustic leak systems in crude service listened for high-frequency signatures from pressurized escape. They false-triggered sometimes during pig launches or valve chatter. They did not usually false trigger in the exact segment with known crack, low wall thickness, and dead cathodic protection. She pressed call on the state number just as the second tone arrived. Higher, continuous, meaning confirmed correlation between acoustic signal and pressure behavior. The board operator answered, and Debbie gave name, location, and the shortest possible statement. Active restart with documented integrity override. Probable release initiating at milepost 214 crossing. The operator said, report logged. Stay clear and maintain line. Outcome secured. Contact made. Thread closed for now. 8 seconds after the confirmed acoustic trip, Jared shouted, pressure drop accelerating, and the station answered him with sound. Not an explosion, not yet, but a deep metallic groan traveling through buried steel and concrete supports as the leak logic latched and flow balance broke. Shut it, shut it, shut it, Mina yelled off mic, voice carried by open air rather than radio discipline. Voss keyed in hard. Initiate ESD Stage 1, close upstream block. Close downstream. His sentence clipped under overlapping alarms. Around 45 seconds after leak confirmation, pump cavitation rose from a rough chatter into a screaming pitch that cut across the pad, impellers biting vapor pockets where liquid feed should have been solid. The entire manifold hammered like a giant wrench, striking pipes in sequence as emergency shutdown valves fought through their strokes. Debbie felt each impact through the fence posts. Actuators whined. Relays clicked rapid fire. Someone blew a handheld horn near the pump house. 3 blasts. Jared's voice cracked. Valve response lag on downstream. I'm not getting full closure. Voss fired back. Cycle it again. Debbie shouted toward the fence whether anyone listened or not. Don't cycle a sticking actuator under surge. You'll spike transient. Her words vanished into sirens. 3 minutes from the first pre-trigger, the failure announced itself above ground, far downslope, beyond the last visible service road and just past the low ridge that hid the Aquifer crossing. A dark column punched up through soil in a ragged arc. Not fire, just pressurized crude and gas, atomizing into morning light. It rose, collapsed, rose again lower as line pressure bled, then spread in a black fan across pale gravel and runoff channels. Even at distance, Debbie could hear it as a rough metallic roar like torn canvas dragged across steel. A field technician near the south access berm stumbled backward, pulling a respirator over his face with shaking hands, while another grabbed his arm and hauled him toward a truck. Radios erupted with overlapping calls. Plume at 214. Need med at South Berm. Wind shift east-southeast. Ignition sources control now. Voss came on comms with command voice forced back into place. All personnel, hot zone perimeter 200 meters. Account by crew lead. No engines near Plume. Good instruction finally, and late. Debbie was already moving along the outer fence toward the gate. Not to enter, but to keep visual and relay if asked. Through the open station lane, she saw Luis helping the coughing contractor into a pickup cab. Mask secured, eyes watering but conscious. No one panicked into chaos. They moved in jagged competence, the kind built by drills that everyone secretly hoped never to use. The pump scream dropped abruptly as upstream isolation finally bit. The roar from downslope persisted another long half-minute, then diminished to a heavy hiss. The smell reached the station next. crude, sulfide, wet earth ripped open. It sat at the back of the throat and made breathing feel granular. Debbie pulled her own half-face respirator from her bag and sealed it on, then keyed the board operator callback number from recent history. Release visible at 214, plume down, product on surface channels, 1 inhalation injury being evacuated. The operator confirmed receipt and gave incident code. Debbie repeated the code into her notes, so there would be no dispute later about when external reporting crossed from probable to confirmed. Around her, floodlights that had remained on after dawn cut pale cones through drifting vapor, turning the black sheen on gravel into shifting silver edges. On channel, Jared sounded young in a way he had not that morning. Estimated leak duration 3 to 4 minutes from first anomaly. Mina answered with clipped control, recovering protocol by force. Log exact times. Do not estimate where timestamp exists. Voss keyed in, breathing hard now, authority fraying at the margins. Who called state? No one responded for a beat. Debbie spoke into Mina's phone line from outside the fence. I did. Initial probable and confirmed update. Both logged. Mina keyed and relayed the sentence exactly. He started to answer, then stopped, perhaps hearing at last how that question would sound in any later review. The siren wound down to intermittent pulses. Crew leads reported head counts. One by one, names came in, all present except the contractor already en route to clinic with oxygen running. Debbie stood at the locked gate with crude odor in her filter, watching the distant dark spread settle into low ground that fed the irrigation draw, and the horror was not theatrical. It was procedural, measurable, preventable. A crack had met pressure. A warning had met ego. Physics had met signature authority and gone straight through it. Behind her, inside the trailer she had left minutes earlier, printers began spitting event logs in long, continuous sheets, each line stamped with second-by-second truth that no one on site could argue with anymore. Debbie watched the printer through the trailer window as it fed page after page into a curling stack, each sheet striped with timestamps, valve positions, alarm codes, and pressure deltas that had already outlived anyone's spin. Mina opened the door, still masked, and called across the gravel. I need your witness line before command locks the room. Debbie nodded, passed through the gate when Luis unlatched it for her, and stepped back into the trailer where she had been fired less than an hour earlier. The heater still blew stale warmth. The same coffee cup sat by her old station. The difference was that now every radio channel carried consequence. Jared stood over the SCADA console with both hands planted on the desk, reading numbers aloud for the event logger. Acoustic pre-trigger at 7:49:12. Confirmed leak trip, 7:49:20. Downstream closure command, 7:49:31. Full downstream, seated 7:51:02. Upstream seated 7:51:14. His voice shook on the first line and steadied by the fourth. Mina typed without looking at him. Debbie took the spare keyboard and opened the emergency mass balance calculator. Pressure decay, pump throughput at ramp fraction, valve lag, known line pack between block points. She entered the values as they were called, then checked them against historian data. Voss stayed on his phone near the back wall, speaking in clipped executive shorthand. Contained a corridor. No ignition. One medical transport non-fatal. He listened, jaw tight, then said, "'Cause undetermined pending inspection." Debbie looked up at that line. 'Cause undetermined was how companies bought hours. The logs had already narrowed it to one segment and one mechanism. At 8:03, the county hazmat captain arrived in a yellow helmet dusted with road grit and took incident command under unified protocol with the state pipeline board officer, who came in right behind him. Their first instruction was procedural and absolute. Preserve records, freeze control logic, no manual edits, no restarts, no exceptions. The state officer set a tamper seal on the SCADA historian rack and asked, "Who initiated external notification at probable leak stage?" Debbie raised a hand. Debbie Clark, former integrity signatory, terminated at 7:44. Notification placed at 7:49 after confirmed pattern correlation and acoustic trip. The officer wrote her name, time, and incident code in one motion and said, "Good call timing." By 8:17, the South Berm team reported the inhalation casualty stable at clinic with supplemental oxygen and no airway burn, which dropped the room's panic by one notch without reducing the gravity. Hazmat maps went up on the wall. Plume footprint, low ground flow paths, runoff channels feeding the irrigation draw, and the recharge zone boundary sketched in thick red marker. Debbie stepped through defect location with the board officer, laying the UT grid over the route map. This cluster here, MP214C. Crack at weld toe, active weep, documented before restart. She produced the absorbent strip envelope, the coupon chain logs, and the rectifier undervoltage trend packet. The officer checked seal numbers and signed receipt. Physical evidence transferred, witnessed, and locked. Outside, vacuum truck contractors staged booms and temporary berm socks, while air monitors ticked at the trailer door. The smell of crude stayed heavy even through filters. On the radio, a field tech called out Sheen, entering a shallow rill toward the draw. Command answered with immediate diversion order. Trench cut, absorbent rolls, portable underflow dam. No drama, just work against a moving clock. At 8:42, Debbie's mass balance sheet generated the first defensible release estimate. 16,800 barrels, with a confidence band wide enough to make everyone grimace. The board officer asked for assumptions. Debbie read each one, including valve seating lag and cavitation interval uncertainty. If downstream actuator latency was 60 seconds as logged, upper bound goes above 19,000. Jared swallowed and nodded. Latency was 91 seconds from command to seated feedback. She recalculated. The number stepped upward. No one argued with arithmetic. A corporate legal representative joined by speakerphone at 8:55, voice precise and bloodless. All site personnel are under litigation hold. No one deletes messages. No one revises logs. All notebook pages are evidence. The line clicked. Then Insurer Claims Counsel joined the same bridge and asked the question everyone in the trailer expected. Were any integrity alarms active at restart? Voss answered first. There were advisory discrepancies under review. Mina looked at Debbie, then at the written override slip stapled to the no-go entry, and spoke into the room microphone so the recording captured plain words. Active red cathodic protection alarms for 19 days. UT below threshold at 214 degrees Celsius. Documented weld crack with active hydrocarbon weep. Restart proceeded under management override. The call went silent for 3 long seconds. Claims Counsel came back with formal diction. Under Policy Section 7.3, willful safeguard override materially affects coverage determination, We will require full document production. Voss started to respond, but corporate legal cut him off. Understood. We will cooperate. The insurer ended the call without pleasantries. By 9:20, state sampling teams were already dispatching to down-gradient wells with purge pumps, glass vials, and chain forms. Debbie knew those kits and what they implied. Benzene, chlorides, sulfides, dissolved hydrocarbons. Then the waiting period while contaminants migrated through fractured sandstone, according to gradients nobody could negotiate with. Delayed harm was still harm. It just arrived on groundwater time instead of pipeline time. In the command trailer, damage accounting shifted from engineering to operations finance. A planner projected outage scenarios onto the wall. Best case, 21 days if excavation is localized and groundwater clear. The board officer shook his head. Groundwater is not clear by default. You crossed a recharge corridor. Debbie added quietly. You also have to cut out failed section, inspect adjacent girth welds, replace coding system, restore CP continuity, hydro test, validate with Smart Pig rerun, and satisfy board hold points. The planner revised his estimate to 56 days. Hazmat captain said, add permitting and water logistics if wells hit. The number moved again. 73 days appeared on the screen and stayed there. At 10:05, a courier brought printed screenshots from dispatch showing the 731 transfer window pressure messages and the no-go transmission Debbie had placed on recorded channel. External contact thread closed. Dispatch had escalated. Dispatch had warned. Dispatch logs matched site logs. The board officer clipped those pages into the incident binder behind Debbie's refusal statement and the termination record. Loaded setup paid off in paper sequence, line by line. The first press inquiry reached corporate communications before noon, and by 11:12 they issued a holding statement about an operational release under investigation. No mention of override, no mention of Aquifer. Within 30 minutes, ranch associations had shared photos of sheen in drainage cuts on local networks, and reputational damage began exactly where technical warnings had been ignored. Not as one loud collapse, but as confidence draining out of every stakeholder channel at once. At 12:04, clinic update confirmed the contractor with inhalation exposure would be observed overnight and released if blood chemistry stayed stable. One injury, no fatalities. The room accepted that with relief and shame braided together. Safety drills had prevented a body count. Management decisions had created the exposure. Through early afternoon, Debbie sat with the state officer and reconstructed the command chain minute by minute. She gave only what she had seen, heard, measured, or logged. 720 direct pressure for sign-off. 731 no-go to dispatch. 744 termination. 745 restart initiation. 749 anomaly and trip. She did not embellish. She did not need to. The officer compared her sequence to recorder timestamps and said, "Your chronology is internally consistent." He said the same to Mina and later to Caleb, whose statement confirmed he had refused unconditional sign-off before replacement authority was inserted. By 14:30, excavation crews reached the failure zone under board supervision. Camera feed from the trench monitor came into the trailer. Coating peeled back in a ragged flap, steel eaten into clustered pits, and a crack path running from weld toe into thinned wall exactly where Debbie's map had marked it. No flames, no cinematic collapse, just a defect profile matching every warning she had issued. The board metallurgist spoke once over speaker. Mechanism appears consistent with corrosion fatigue interaction and sulfide-assisted cracking. Final lab pending. That sentence shifted the legal posture from dispute to containment. Corporate legal requested all termination records related to Debbie within the hour. Human Resources sent the file, including Voss's cited reason: insubordination tied to restart refusal. The board officer underlined that line and attached it to the override slip. Distinctive detail resolved. The public firing had not vanished into rumor. It had become causation evidence. At 16:05, Insurer Claims Counsel returned with preliminary position in writing. Reservation of rights immediately. Probable denial if willful override substantiated. Subject to final investigation. Finance asked for exposure ranges. Cleanup contractor estimates came first. Containment, soil removal, disposal, groundwater interception, monitoring wells, replacement water trucking, land restoration, pipeline replacement segment, and third-party claims handling. The low-end figure landed above $100 million. The high-end crossed 180. No one in the trailer spoke for a full half-minute after the spreadsheet settled. By the time dusk took the ridge, the release estimate tightened to 19,400 barrels, based on reconciled meter totals and valve lag corrections. 11 municipal and private wells were flagged for immediate quarantine sampling protocol after preliminary field strips indicated hydrocarbon impact risk. The board issued an emergency order sealing the Red Mesa Gate with hazard tape and physical lockout pending compliance milestones. That image had been teaser material at dawn. Now it was procedure. Voss remained on site through evening debrief, but authority had drained from his posture. He answered questions in shorter and shorter sentences, while document requests multiplied around him. At 1910, corporate legal informed command that he was removed from operational control, effective immediately, and directed not to contact witnesses except through counsel. He set his phone down, looked at the stack of logs, and said nothing. Debbie stepped outside into cold air that carried crude and wet earth. Floodlights washed the yard in hard white. Vacuum trucks idled in a line like patient machinery, waiting for a debt schedule. Mina joined her at the steps and handed over a copy of the board receipt for transferred evidence. "Your files are in state custody now," she said. Debbie folded the paper once and put it in her notebook. Physics had done what it always did. It ignored rank, accepted inputs, and returned outcomes. A manager had tried to save schedule and face by stripping expertise out of the loop. The loop closed anyway, only larger, dirtier, and vastly more expensive. At 6:55 the next morning, Debbie stood in the State Materials Lab receiving room while a technician in nitrile gloves read seal numbers out loud and a court reporter typed every word. The room smelled like solvent, printer toner, and wet concrete. On the stainless table sat the evidence she had fought to preserve. Absorbent strip envelope, coupon bags, UT grid printouts with Mina's initials, rectifier trend exports, the handwritten override slip Voss had forced Mina to staple over the no-go log, and the termination record placed directly beneath Debbie's refusal. The board metallurgist, Dr. Harlan Pike, looked from the chain sheet to Debbie. "You're confirming this strip was clean prior to contact at 6:45? Debbie answered, "Confirmed. Witnessed by Mina Ortiz and Caleb Rinn." Pike nodded to the technician, who opened the envelope under camera. A chemist pressed the darkened fibers into a vial, ran a fast spectroscreen, and read the result without drama. Hydrocarbon fraction present, sulfide signature consistent with sour crude. Pike marked it in red pen and slid the page toward the reporter. Active weep before restart. Now chemically confirmed. He moved to the coupons next. Under magnification, pitting clustered in sharp craters beneath black deposits. A microbiology analyst lifted her eyes from the incubator sheet and said, "Sulfate-reducing bacteria growth positive from coupon residue." Debbie watched Pike draw one clean arrow across the mechanism diagram. Coding disbandment, CP failure, MIC pitting, weld toe crack, pressure cycling, through wall release, no missing link. At 9:10, the board opened the witness conference in a windowless hearing room above county offices, fluorescent lights buzzing over gray tables. Jared sat with both hands around a paper cup he never drank from. Caleb kept his restart form copy clipped to a legal pad as if the paper might still defend him. Mina had brought the original incident binder in a sealed archive box, and Luis waited near the back wall in work boots still stained with yesterday's mud. Board counsel played the dispatch recording first. Debbie's no-go transmission at 7:31 came through clear, then Voss's standby for go, then the alarm tones. Counsel paused on Jared's line. Repeating microdrop at 214. Pattern interval about 12 seconds. She looked up. "Mr. Hale, why did you continue ramp after this call-out?" Jared swallowed. "I said it twice. Trent told me it was model jitter and to keep opening." Counsel asked, "Did Ms. Clark give a mechanism warning at the threshold?" Jared nodded once. "She said if oscillation repeated, it was leak initiation behavior. I heard her. I didn't stop." Caleb spoke next, without being prompted, voice tight but steady. "I refused unconditional sign-off. He replaced me." Mina opened to the stapled page and slid it forward so everyone could see the order chain. "He instructed me to clear the hold code. I required written instruction. This is that instruction." Luis finally lifted his head and said what his loaded silence on the catwalk had been holding since dawn yesterday. "I saw the strip turn dark at the weld before restart. I knew it wasn't condensation. I didn't back Debbie out loud when I should have." No one interrupted him. Counsel only said, "Your statement is now on record." By 11:40, Voss entered for a compelled interview with company counsel on one side and board enforcement on the other. He still wore the clean jacket, but the posture had changed. His shoulders stayed high, defensive, like he expected each sentence to land. Enforcement played the trailer audio where he terminated Debbie at 7:44 and initiated restart at 7:45. Then they projected the SCADA historian timeline beside the mass balance estimate and trench photos from MP214. Pike narrated with clinical precision. Observed crack path intersects minimum thickness pit cluster. Failure morphology aligns with corrosion fatigue growth under cyclic loading. Rectifier under voltage logs show 19-day continuity. There is no plausible, spontaneous mechanism detached from prior warnings. Voss tried one line of retreat. "I acted on monitored pressure being inside limits." Pike answered immediately. "Limits assume intact barriers. You had explicit notice those barriers were compromised." Board counsel added the insurer call transcript, including Mina's correction to Voss's advisory discrepancies language. "Do you contest this recording?" Voss looked at the table and said, "No." Counsel's tone stayed neutral. "Then the record reflects willful safeguard override after documented integrity refusal. She passed the file to the enforcement chair, who signed the interim order in front of him. Removal from operational authority, mandatory referral for criminal negligence review, preservation hold on all communications, and site ban pending adjudication. At 14:25, the insurer's regional claims director joined by secure video for the coverage determination conference. The screen showed 3 boxes: claims, operator legal, state observer. Debbie sat in the back row as technical witness, saying nothing unless asked. The director read from the policy and then from the chronology, each clause aligned to a timestamp. Section 7.3 excludes loss, where insured personnel intentionally bypass required safeguards after documented specialist warning. We have warning at 7:31, termination at 7:44, restart at 7:45, leak confirmation at 7:49:20. We also have written instruction to clear hold code. Coverage is denied for primary release loss and downstream groundwater liability, subject to statutory obligations for immediate remediation funding. Operator Counsel asked for reconsideration based on operational ambiguity. The director shook her head. Ambiguity ended when your own staff chemically verified active weep before restart. Denial stands. The state observer requested that decision in writing within 1 hour for consent order attachment. You will have it in 20 minutes, the director said. External contact thread closed. Insurer notified. Insurer responded. Insurer denied with cause. 3 days later, under a hard blue sky and constant generator hum at the cleanup corridor, the board held the emergency enforcement hearing in a temporary command tent, so impacted landowners could attend without passing through corporate offices. Ranchers sat beside municipal water reps, respirator marks still visible on some crew faces. The contractor who had taken the inhalation hit appeared by remote link from clinic follow-up and confirmed he had been released without permanent injury. His physician note entered as Exhibit 18. Board staff presented groundwater strips from 11 quarantined wells and replacement water trucking logs already running on county routes. Then Debbie testified, standing at a folding table with the same notebook she had carried off-site. She read only from recorded facts: defect mechanism, refusal language, order chain, alarm progression, release pathway. Voss's counsel tried to frame her as disgruntled after termination. Debbie answered without heat. Termination occurred after refusal. Refusal occurred after measured evidence. Sequence is documented by independent timestamps. The chair asked one final technical question. Could this release have been prevented with shutdown and excavation at first no-go? Debbie said, yes. Pike, seated 2 chairs down, added, I concur. The chair struck the table once with her palm and issued findings into the microphone. Willful override substantiated, management retaliation linked to safeguard bypass. Corrective orders mandatory. Criminal referral affirmed. On the 2nd Tuesday of November, the criminal court held arraignment in Red Mesa County. Courtroom packed with workers in reflective jackets and residents carrying bottled water receipts. The prosecutor read felony negligence counts tied to documented override orders and retaliatory termination connected to environmental release. Voss stood, voice flat, and entered a plea through counsel. The judge set conditions, surrendered his managerial licenses pending trial, and prohibited him from directing any safety-critical operation. When the judge asked whether pre-trial release posed occupational risk, the prosecutor held up the board order and said, "He is already barred from Pipeline Management Authority by administrative action." The judge replied, "That bar remains." No shouting, no spectacle, just law catching up to radio, audio, and stapled paper. That afternoon, in a plain conference room at the operator's regional office, Debbie sat across from interim leadership, board oversight, and a labor representative while rain tapped the windows. There was no apology speech dressed as strategy. The interim president slid a document across the table. Independent Corrosion Authority is reinstated effective immediately. Integrity alarms now trigger automatic lockout that operations cannot clear without dual sign-off from state observer and corrosion lead. Retaliatory discipline tied to safety refusal is prohibited under revised policy and audited quarterly. Debbie read every page, then asked, "Who controls archive access for incident logs?" The compliance director answered, "Third-party records custodian, immutable retention, 7 years minimum." She asked, "And field authority badges?" "Restored to technical chain, not operations chain." She signed acceptance as returning principal corrosion engineer, with direct reporting line to the board monitor during the consent period. Mina, now formal integrity coordinator, signed witness. Caleb signed process compliance witness. Jared signed training attestation witness after completing mandatory failure mechanism retraining and giving his statement under oath. Luis had already signed his own corrective action pledge that morning. He met Debbie at the hallway door and said, "I won't stay quiet next time." She answered, "There cannot be a next time on this mechanism." At sunset, Debbie drove back past the sealed red mesa gate where hazard tape still snapped in the wind and replacement water tankers queued on the access road. The lock remained as it should have. Cleanup pumps thudded in the distance, drawing contaminated groundwater into treatment skids under floodlights. She parked, stepped out, and listened. No transfer roar, no rushed commands, only remediation equipment working at the speed reality allowed. Her phone buzzed with one final official notice from the state board. Evidence inventory closed. All submitted items analyzed and archived. Dispatch records certified. External reports reconciled. Consent decree entered. Operator compliance clock active. Voss formally disqualified from pipeline management pending criminal disposition. She read the message once, saved it to the case file, and looked at the dark line of buried steel crossing the basin. He had fired expertise to protect a quarter's numbers, and the system had billed him in law, money, and public trust until nothing of that shortcut remained. Physics had not argued with him. It had simply kept the ledger